Hey there, I'm Christy Tate, USA Today bestselling author, and today I am reading the first episode of Carly and the Christian Cowboy. People often ask me which of my books that I've written is my favorite, and if I'm in the first 100 pages, which I call the honeymoon phase, then the answer is always the book I'm working on. If I'm in the messy middle or near the rightest end, or especially if I'm editing, then it's any other book. But Carly and the Christian Cowboy has a special place in my heart. And if you make it all the way through episode 5, I think you'll understand why. I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions. I am new to YouTube, and so is my dog Coco. And I am concerned about the glare in my glasses. And actually, these ones aren't too bad, are they? So throughout the episodes, I will be trying on different pairs of glasses and seeing which ones are the most flattering. Anyway, let's get started. Carly and the Christian Cowboy, episode 1. I don't think I like these. There we go, that's much better. 1998. Sweat rolled down between... I'm just going to start over. Sweat rolled between Carly's shoulder blades and trickled down her back. George, the Corolla, had made it this far, but not without a few complaints and hiccups. Sadly, the same thing couldn't be said for the air conditioning. It had died a sudden death on one of those unending stretches of eastern Washington, only inhabited by a smattering of hungry-looking cows. Since that sad occasion, Carly had been driving with the windows down and stopping at every rest area along the highway to soak up a towel in the restroom. She draped the sopping wet towel around her shoulders to cool herself off, but the hot, arid air made quick work of the moisture. She'd be as wrinkled and brittle as a Ruffles potato chip by the time she reached Cascadia. In the sleepy town of Leavenworth, a community snuggled in the Cascade foothills, Carly whispered, "I'm really doing this," before turning on to Highway 2. Mom, of course, would try to talk her out of it. Daddy would have an opinion as well if he'd known she was headed his way. Her roommates, Ginny and Anna, had pleaded for her to stay, but the thought of trying to work and watch Leo pant over Cat Crisco, well, she couldn't do it. She had missed an image of Leo dressed in his Armani suit, briefcase in hand, wearing that heart-stopping smile that charmed judges, juries, attorneys, waitresses, but librarians and cranky old spinsters. She glanced at her reflection in the review to give herself a stern reprimand. Stop it. Stop torturing yourself. She didn't need Leo. She didn't need a man. If she learned anything from her formidable mother, it was that men were always optional. And a man is never a financial plan. If she learned anything, so why was she running to her daddy? That was a really good question, because he could tell her what to do and maybe help her come up with a plan on how to pay off her student debt. Hadn't he done exactly what Carly, was now doing, escaping the city, embracing a quieter, simpler life where the sky was huge and the problems were small? It didn't matter that she'd have to find a job in the middle of Washington nowhere, retake the bar, and find a place to live. She'd call Daddy when she got to Everett. He would understand. But somehow she'd gotten lost in her head somewhere just over the Washington state line, and she found herself outside of Sweetberry Ridge, cruising along the Cascade Highway when George began to sputter. Carly flexed her fingers around the steering wheel and offered up a prayer. "Please hold on, George. We're almost there." George coughed. No, no, no. Keeping one hand on the wheel and her eyes on the road, Carly rummaged through her bag. She fingered a wallet, a package of gum, a hairbrush. Finally, she found her phone and pulled it out. Like George, it lingered on death's door. Sputtering and coughing, George limped to the side of the road. Carly's phone had just enough battery to call Daddy. She pressed its number, something she should have done miles, if not days ago. It went straight to voicemail. Just hearing his deep, familiar voice gave Carly a sense of ease. She relaxed against George's worn and torn vinyl seat, closed her eyes, and pulled in a deep breath of the pine-scented air. Closing her eyes, memories of Daddy's ranch swam through her mind, swimming in the canal, memories of Swimming in the canal, horseback riding up the switchbacks, flying kites on the ranch, a host of children splashed in a creek, water droplets sparkling like diamonds flew through the air. The children, small and dark with wild curly hair, chased each other through the crystal water. Someone rapped on the window. Carly's eyes flew open and she nearly gasped when she saw a man with startling blue eyes staring at her. He squatted beside George and pushed his black cowboy hat back so he could peer in at her. He looked familiar. Strong jaw, sun-kissed hair, dark hair curling off his forehead. Christian Haywood, the oldest of the Haywood brothers, the wild boys who lived on the ramshackle ranch next door to Daddy. She suddenly saw him as one of the dark-haired children in her dream. Shaking the image away, she sat up and straightened her sweat-stained blouse. His eyes widened, telling her that he recognized her too. Carly Wentworth? What are you doing here? Tresta Haywood to get right to the point. No idle chit-chat. Hey, Christian. He blinked at her. What happened to your eyes? Contacts. She tried not to huff her frustration. Huh. He didn't seem impressed. The contacts had been wildly expensive because of her heterochromia, a rare genetic condition that made her left eye blue and her right brown. Thanks to her contacts, now both were brown. She would have preferred blue, but that would have been even more expensive. But none of this was any of Christian's business. I'm visiting my dad. Also, no need to tell Christian her plans, or lack thereof. Does he know that? Carly opened her mouth, considering telling a lie, something her ethical daddy frowned upon, but it was common enough practice for her attorney mother. But she reconsidered. It's a surprise. Christian pushed back his hat and rubbed his forehead. It sure will be, seeing as how your daddy is in Mexico. Mexico? Carly blinked back sudden tears and cursed her own stupidity. Why hadn't she called him first? But she knew why. Pride. She didn't want to tell him or her mother or even her squirrely brother, for that matter, that she was ditching her dream job with one of the most prestigious law firms in the Midwest because of a man. Are you sure? Christian stood and braced his hands on George's roof. Absolutely. He took Micah with him. They're aiming on bringing back a new broodmare or two. Carly's throat clenched, but her curiosity spiked. She had a lot of questions and went with the most pressing. When will they be back? What if she couldn't get into the house? When had her father gotten so thick with Micah, or the third Haywood boy and arguably the tamest? Although she wasn't sure that the word tame could be applied to any of them. Was Micah working for Dad? Was it even safe to be talking to Christian? Because, despite his name, he was the scariest. I don't know. Have you tried calling him? She picked up her phone and showed him the blank screen. My phone is dead. And your car? Maybe the same story? He gave her a slow grin. You're in a pickle. Looks like you could use some help. Can I offer you a ride? After Christian deposited Carly's bags in the back of his battered truck, he held the door open for her and watched her buckle up. She looked as out of place as a hen in a pig pen. True, his truck wasn't full of trash, but a fine, dusty layer of grime coated the floor, seats, and dashboard. Carly's face, bright, pink, and shiny, told him she was hot or nervous, or maybe both. She had her dark curls scooped up and tied back with a green ribbon that matched her eyes and t-shirt. His fingers itched to tug the ribbon and send the curls free, so he just shoved his hands into his pockets to prevent any such mishaps. Would you like a water? He asked. She turned her pretty face toward him. That'd be great, she said with a hint of relief. He closed the door, rounded the pickup, and pulled a couple of chilled bottles out of the cooler he kept in the truck's bed. Pausing outside the driver's side door, he wondered what he and Carly Wentworth could possibly have to say to each other on the long drive home. He'd never been great with women, and he found Carly and her ilk the most intimidating. Beautiful, smart, driven. He slid in beside her, marveling that in just a few minutes she'd been in the car, the air already hinted of her perfume, floral and spice. She'd been in the car, the air already... After digging his keys out of his pocket, he started the truck. Immediately, the audiobook he'd been listening to sounded. Winston was a man of action, the narrator droned. Christian slammed it off. What's that? Carly unscrewed the bottle and took a long, slow drink. Christian found her mesmerizing. He shook himself and looked away, determined not to stare. She'd asked him something. What was it? Oh, yeah, the book. Churchill keeps me company when I'm working. Winston Churchill? He nodded. I'm kind of addicted to audiobooks. She grinned. Who knew? Christian put the truck in gear. He didn't want to talk about audiobooks or drug up memories that might remind her he'd struggled with a reading disability all through school. She'd been in all the gifted classes while he'd hung out with the remedial crowd. Why don't you tell me what you've been up to in Chicago? She couldn't have been all that successful as she drove that beater car. I was a junior legal associate at Branston, Brighton, and Halls. Past tense, he said. That's right. She paused. I'm taking a leave of absence. He slid her a glance. Can you do that? Sure. She said the word without one note of confidence. He flexed his fingers around the wheel and kept his gaze on the road. How about you? She asked. What have you been up to? Just running the ranch. A muscle in his jaw flexed. And your brothers? Most are still at the homestead, going to school and helping out. Jet and Asher left for college. Both got scholarships. Did he sound bitter? He didn't mean to sound bitter. Hannah and Eden are both at home as well. I'd forgotten about the sister. There were so many boys. 7 boys. Followed by 2 baby girls. I've always sort of envied large families. There's just me and Teddy. Is he still in California? She nodded. UCLA law. All of you following in your mama's footsteps. My dad was also an attorney. His brow wrinkled. For the military though, right? No, he was in the military first and attorney second. He was just discharged after he lost his hand. He went back to school for his law degree, where he met my mom, and you probably can figure out the rest. Not really, but he didn't want to press her. He knew most didn't hold marriages as sacred as his parents. Over the years, Christian had worked off and on for Flint Wentworth and found him to be a fair and honest man. His own father had little respect for Wentworth, or anyone that matter, who were, as his dad said, all boots and no buckle. Wealthy men with lavish lifestyles, wearing tall hats for the heck of it. Just because you wear the hat doesn't mean you can ride the bull, Dad would say. Thinking of Dad brought a lump to Christian's throat. He flexed his fingers around the steering wheel and tried to zero back in on Carly's conversation. I'm thinking of asking my dad if I can join his firm, Carly said. That caught his attention. I'm not sure there's much work. You know, Cascadia isn't getting any bigger, and it wasn't all that big to start with. Most people are like bats escaping a blocked cave after graduation. They leave for college and never come back. But not you. Not me. No point in telling her he didn't go away to school, but had taken correspondence courses from Wellington University, a correspondence program that had allowed him to work at the ranch during the day and take classes at his leisure. And even then, Daddy had griped, told him there was no need for book learning. He had horse smarts plenty and a work ethic that would serve him and his family. And then, on death's door, Dad had dropped his bombshell. I was sorry to hear about your dad, Carly said. Christian blew out a breath. Thank you. How's your mom? Clueless. But of course he couldn't tell Carly that. He couldn't tell anyone. She says she's got no time to grieve. Of course Mama didn't have to work so hard, but only Christian knew that. He didn't want to talk about his parents. What should we do about your car? Would I get a fine if I just left it there? I don't know, but why would you want to? She shrugged. I'm not attached to it. It was my roommate's. Living in the city, I didn't need one, didn't want one until, well, about yesterday. She was leaving a heap of things unsaid. He waited, hoping she'd tell him why she decided to leave Chicago in such a hurry, but when she fell quiet, he said, if you look in the glove compartment, you'll find my phone. Hank Miller should be a recent call. He can tow your car and fix it up if you'd like. Carly did as he asked, pulled out the phone and cradled it in her hands. I don't know if it's worth saving. You could always sell it for parts or scrap metal. That's more practical than just tossing it away. She bit her lip, considering, then changed the subject. So, is Micah working for my dad? Sometimes. Right now, Seth is caring for your dad's animals while he's away. That's a relief. Now at least I know I won't have to break in. I assume he has a key? I believe you'll find it in the watering can by the back door. Some things never change. He didn't like to believe that was true. Otherwise, what was the point? The phone buzzed and Carly dropped it into her lap as if it was live and capable of biting her. "Do you want me to answer it?" she asked. Nah, the last thing he needed was ribbing from his brothers about his having a woman in his truck. "Just hit the speaker button for me." She flipped it open and did as he asked. "Christian," Seth's voice floated into the truck's cab. "Come quick, something terrible's happened with Mama." "Tell me," Christian demanded. "I gotta go. I'm taking her to the hospital. I think it's bad." "Seth," Christian yelled. "Meet us at the hospital." Seth ended the call. Christian swung a glance at Carly. She patted his arm. "Don't worry about me. I can get a ride home from there." He pressed the gas pedal and the truck roared in response. "How?" "I don't know, a taxi or something. This isn't Chicago." The truck shuddered from the speed, but he didn't let up. The gauge edged to over 100 miles an hour. Fortunately, the only thing sharing the road with them was a few tumbleweeds. "I know." She gazed out the side window. "What would I have done if you hadn't come along?" "That's a really good question and something you probably should have thought about before you attempted to drive an unreliable car over the pass." He closed his eyes for a long moment. "I'm sorry. None of my business. I shouldn't have snapped at you." "It's fine," she said through clenched teeth. "You're just worried about your mom. I get it." She gripped the oh my heck handle above the door. He eased off the gas when they rolled into Cascadia. "You can always wait," he began. "I'll figure things out," Carly promised. "Don't worry about me. You've been more than kind already." That's the end of episode 1. Stay tuned. I hope to have episode 2 up shortly. Thanks.